Good morning, Lucky Follow Christian Church, and all our friends out there that want to come to Sunday school. We're having Sunday school at the barn today. At the church right now, we're starting the Easter egg hunt for the children. So if you're planning on doing the Easter egg hunt, you better get up there in a hurry. I want to ask you to please continue to pray for Ramona. And I want to ask you to please remember Stephen D. for travel mercies. And let's get right into the lesson because we're running really late today. Today, Jesus is going to predict his death. This is in Matthew 16, and we've been studying Matthew 16 for several Sundays now. And Jesus is going to predict his own death. And what has just happened is Peter has just made this incredible statement. When Jesus is asked, "Who do you say that I am?" to his apostles. And then Peter says that you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. This is probably the first man on earth that's ever figured out that Jesus really is the Messiah and has said it. So when he says that, Jesus tells him that he's going to give him the keys to the kingdom. That's just such a great statement of faith that he tells Peter he's going to be blessed. And so it's just a wonderful moment. And then let's read verses 20 through 23, which is going to be what we're going to focus on today. Then in verse 20 of chapter 16, book of Matthew, and then he sternly warned the disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. And then verse 21, from then on, Jesus began to tell his disciples plainly. Now, they understand now that he's the Messiah, so he's going to start telling them very plainly that it's necessary for him to go to Jerusalem. He says, I'm going to suffer some terrible things at the hands of the elders, the leading priests, and the teachers of the religious law. He would be killed, but on the third day, he would be raised from the dead. So he's told them that now. But remember, they think a Messiah is someone who's going to come into his kingdom on earth, and it's going to be an earthly kingdom, and that he's going to rule over. He's going to come in, and they're going to fight with the Romans, and then he's going to have his earthly kingdom. He's going to sit on a throne. No, but just remember that that's what they still think. Even Peter, even though Peter has made that great statement about who Jesus really is. In verse 22, Peter says, he took him aside. Now, when someone takes someone aside, that generally is talking about just takes him, puts his arms around him, pulls him over, and he began to reprimand him. And in King James, it's going to say rebuke, and rebuke is going to be to reprimand or to criticize. I'm reading from New Living Translation. He began to reprimand him for saying such things, because remember, Peter has just been given this wonderful blessing. He's gotten stroked because he's gotten it right. And so now that he's done that, he's just feeling really good about himself. And he's saying, that's not going to happen to you. And he said, heaven forbid, Lord, this will never happen to you. And what Peter's thinking is, you're holy. You're the Messiah. This isn't going to happen to you. How could that happen to you? No one can touch you. Jesus turned to Peter and he said, get away from me, Satan. You are a dangerous trap to me. You are seeing things merely from a human point of view, not from God's. Ooh, that's a pretty strict reprimand, wasn't it? Yes, Lord, you are the Messiah. But what does it mean? They really don't know what it means. The disciples are still thinking the Messiah is a conquering warrior, king, hero that's going to drive the Romans out of Palestine. That is why Jesus commanded them to be silent and not tell anyone, because if he told someone that he was the Messiah and everybody thinks that he's going to be this warrior king that's going to come in and drive Rome out, then they think, finally, we're going to get our land back. The reason he didn't tell them the reason he told them not to tell anyone is because they have to be quiet, because a rebellion could rise up. If they know that he is the Christ, the Son of the living God, he's the Messiah, and they know that he has the power of God in him, and that he could lead a revolt and that they could get their land back. But what I want you to remember is that back between the Old and the New Testament, that there was the group called the Maccabees, and the Maccabees came in from 167 to 160 BC before Christ, and they raised a revolt against the Romans. Well, guess what? They were defeated terribly. So Jesus doesn't want that kind of thing to happen again. That's not what he came to do. So he's telling them, just be quiet about it. But the disciples could preach that Jesus was the Messiah. If they were going to do that, before they could do that, they had to learn what the great fact actually meant. In verse 22, Peter took him aside. This shows Peter's reaction from realizing who Jesus was when he claimed to be the Messiah and the Son of God. So Jesus begins to open their understanding by showing he must go to Jerusalem, suffer at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes. Now, the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, guys, those guys are the Sanhedrin. Now, you know that the Sanhedrin is going to be the Jewish council that has 71 members in it, and they're patterned after the 70 elders that God established through Moses. In the Gospels, they are called the Council of the Elders. They are like our Supreme Court. But in Judea, they were under Roman authority, so they couldn't give capital punishment. That's why, let's look at this. We're laying the framework for what's about to happen on Easter Sunday. And this is really a good lesson to lead up to that, because there's so many things that sometimes we skip over and we just look at the end result and we fail to see how God is working these things together to make it all work out the way he wants it to work out. The elders were respected men of the people. The chief priests were predominantly Sadducees. The scribes were the Pharisees. Jesus is saying that he must suffer at the hands of the Sanhedrin and the religious leaders of the country. He's telling them that he's going to suffer. He's helping them to understand he wants them to get it so that they understand what's getting ready to happen. Okay, let's look at how Peter reacts. Peter expected the Messiah of power and glory to have the conquest, not to be the suffering Messiah on a cross, which was the most painful death known to man. When Scripture says Peter took him aside or caught hold of him, it means that Peter threw his arms around Jesus. Jesus said, "Get behind me, Satan." Why did Jesus say that? I mean, he just got through saying great things about Peter and blessing him. And now when Peter is talking about, "Lord, that's not going to happen to you." And then Jesus says, "Get behind me, Satan." Do you remember we've heard "get behind me, Satan" before? We heard that over in Luke. Let's think about Luke, the 4th chapter. We've heard it more times than that. But that's where Jesus has just started his ministry. He's gone out into the wilderness. He is being tempted for 40 days. So what happens? He tells Satan to get behind him. You remember that? And that's a long story, and I'm not going to go there because I don't have time. But, when Jesus said that to Peter, I want you to think about it just a minute. Did he say that with blazing eyes and a snarling anger? And did he say it like he was really angry with Peter? Or did he say it like he had a wounded heart because Peter still doesn't get it? Did he have it with a kind of a grief or kind of a shuddering sadness because none of the apostles actually get it, that he has to go to the cross, that he has to die? That's what he's been sent here to do as the suffering Messiah. Why did he react this way? I do want you to remember that when Jesus was in the wilderness, and in Luke 4:8, and he says to Satan, "Get behind me, Satan," I want you to remember what the word Satan means. The word Satan means adversary. That's the definition of the word Satan, adversary. So when he's saying, "Get behind me, Satan," that's the same thing he said to Satan out in the wilderness. "Get behind me, Satan. You're an adversary of mine." He's basically telling Peter, that's an adversarial role that you're taking. That's not the right role. That's not God's role. Satan is any force that seeks to deflect us from the way of God. Also, any influence which seeks to help make us turn from the hard way that sometimes God has picked for us into the easy way. Yeah, go ahead and do that. Everybody else is doing it. It's okay. God won't care. Yeah, God cares. God hadn't changed. He still cares. We still have to remember that, even though society is going to tell you that there's lots of things you can do, they're okay now because everybody does it. Satan is any power who seeks to make human desires take the place of divine imperative, a command, a strong request, or an exhortation is a divine imperative. So anytime that we have this conflict and we're fighting within ourselves, oh, but that's okay, I can do that just this once. But what does Satan do? He starts to lead you down a road, and it gets easier and easier and easier to follow him instead of following what we're supposed to be doing when we follow Christ. It's suspected that what would really wound Jesus' heart and make him speak to Peter that way was that Peter was speaking to Jesus as Satan spoke to Jesus that day in the wilderness when he was tempted. You remember? Satan was saying, you don't have to do this. I'm the prince of the earth. Satan was the prince of the earth. He was giving all authority of the earth. And he tells Jesus, you can make bread out of stones. I can take you up to this high mountain and I can tell you, I'll give you all of this. In other words, you don't have to do anything else that God's told you to do. Remember Adam and Eve? You don't have to listen to God. What does he know? Well, guys, I'm just going to tell you that this had to be a very hard thing for Jesus to hear, because it must have reminded him of the way that he was tempted by Satan in the wilderness. And here's Peter saying similar things. You don't have to go God's way. It doesn't have to be hard. You don't have to do that. You're the Messiah. So Jesus said, get behind me, Satan. Peter thought he was speaking to Jesus out of love and fondness for Jesus. He's been with him for going on 3 years. Peter was mistaken. That was not what Jesus wanted to hear. There's 2 early interpretations. These go way back for get behind me, Satan, and what do they mean? And I just want to share them with you because I'm just about out of time. First, Jesus was saying to Peter, Peter, your place is behind me. That's an early interpretation. That doesn't mean that's exactly what that scripture means. It means that's how man interpreted it, to say, Peter, your place is behind me, not in front of me. We must all take the way of Christ and never seek to compel Christ to take our way. You see what I'm saying? That's exactly what I think Jesus was saying to Peter. Peter, you can't compel me to do what you think is right. I've got to do what I think is right, even though I know I'm going to suffer. And, Jesus didn't want to go. He even said there at the end in the Garden of Gethsemane, he said, if this cup can pass from me. But, this is something that he had to do, and he did it for us. And there's no better time for us to remember that than on Easter Sunday. Jesus says to Peter, be gone behind me, in order to say, become my follower, not my leader, Peter. The other thing Satan could never become is a follower of Christ. His pride would never allow him to submit. That is why he was Satan. That is the difference in Peter and Satan. Satan would never get behind Jesus. Satan will never get behind us. He always wants to lead us into temptation and to lead us places that the world says, it's okay. You don't have to do the hard thing. Be sure and remember what we need to do is the hard thing, if that's what God wills. Because if he brings you to it, he's going to bring you through it. As long as we are prepared to try to wholeheartedly follow Jesus, even if we've fallen, guys, even if we've sinned, Even if we've fallen so short, we don't think He can ever take us back. There's still hope for us, hope of glory here on earth and hope of glory in the hereafter. Guys, I hope you have an awesome Easter Sunday. Enjoy your family. We have a turkey breast in the oven right now. One of our kids is making a wonderful ham for turkeys. Ham, and so we're going to have ham and turkey for Easter. So it's going to be a great day for eating. Enjoy your family, and I'll see you at church.